the sky went dark. Not the kind of darkness that came with night, but something deeper, heavier. The stars above the planet Varelles vanished one by one, swallowed by clouds of ash and smoke that rose from burning cities. The war had dragged on for months, and now there was no one left who believed in victory. The Galactic Union had called Varelles its jewel world, the heart of its western colonies. But now, that heart was dying. In the shattered capital, Commander Rel there stood on the edge of a ruined balcony, staring across the skyline that once shone with crystal towers and floating bridges. Now, only broken metal and fire reached toward the heavens. He could still hear the distant screams carried by the wind, the sound of buildings collapsing, the echo of plasma weapons firing somewhere in the distance. The Karth Dominion had surrounded them completely. They were ruthless, efficient, and patient. Every Union world they conquered, they burned to dust. No peace, no survivors, only silence. And now they had come for the last one. Communications. Rel asked quietly, turning toward his aide. The young alien shook her head, eyes wide with fear. Gone, sir. No signals are escaping the atmosphere. The relay towers were destroyed. Rel nodded slowly, though he already knew the answer. The Union High Command had stopped responding 3 days ago. No reinforcements. No rescue. No hope. The end seemed certain. A loud explosion rocked the command building. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling as alarms wailed. They've breached the second perimeter, someone shouted. The sound of plasma fire drew closer. Rel gritted his teeth. Hold your ground, he ordered, though the soldiers' faces showed they had no fight left. Outside, the sky flashed as enemy dropships descended, dark shapes cutting through smoke. Karth soldiers, tall, insectoid, and armored in black carapace, marched through the streets, executing any who resisted. The once proud defense forces of the Union now hid like frightened animals in their own ruins. Rel slammed his fist against the console. We can't die like this, he muttered. Not here. His aide looked up. Sir, what do we do? He opened his mouth to answer, but then stopped. A new sound echoed through the air, a low, thunderous roar that shook the ground. The entire sky flickered with light. For a moment, everyone froze. The enemy guns went silent. The soldiers looked upward, confused. It wasn't an explosion. It was something else. What is that? Someone whispered. On the horizon, several bright lines of light appeared in the upper atmosphere, growing larger every second. They moved too fast for ships, too organized for meteors. Multiple contacts, shouted the radar officer. They're entering from high orbit, unknown transponder codes. Rel rushed to the screen. Union reinforcements. No, sir, the officer replied, voice trembling. The signal patterns don't match anything in our database. The Karth Dominion's command channels burst into panic. Their air patrols tried to respond but were instantly destroyed. Flashes of white light tore through the sky like falling suns. One by one, the unknown objects pierced the clouds, trailing fire behind them as they descended toward the surface. Impact in 10 seconds, cried the technician. Brace for. The ground trembled violently. Columns of flame erupted across the battlefield. Enemy positions vanished under waves of energy and dust. From the observation deck, Rel watched in stunned silence as entire Karth divisions were wiped out in seconds. Then came the silence. A strange, heavy silence that filled the air after the thunder had passed. Only the crackle of fire and the whisper of wind remained. His aide's voice broke the stillness. Commander, what just happened? Rel didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the burning horizon, where massive metal shapes were rising from the smoke. They were ships, but not like any Union design. Their armor was dark, scarred, and marked with symbols no one had seen in generations. They moved like predators, fast, deliberate, unstoppable. A transmission crackled through the damaged comm system, breaking through static. It wasn't in the Union's language. The voice was low, calm, and human. This world is under Terran protection. All hostile forces, stand down. The room fell silent. Every officer turned to stare at the speaker. Terran, someone whispered. That can't be. Humans are extinct. Rel's heart pounded. He remembered the old legends, the Deathworlders, the humans who once fought beside the Union before disappearing into myth. Stories said their homeworld had been destroyed, that no one survived. But those stories had always ended the same way. If they ever returned, the galaxy would tremble again. Outside, the sky glowed red as drop pods rained down from orbit. The Deathworlders had come back. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy's monsters had chosen a side. No one had seen humans for centuries. To most of the galaxy, they were only a story told to frighten young soldiers, a violent species that once tried to burn the stars themselves. But when the Deathworlders fell from the sky, those stories suddenly became real. Commander Rel there stood on the ruined balcony, staring as hundreds of black drop pods cut through the clouds like falling meteors. Each one blazed with fire, leaving trails of smoke and molten debris behind. The Karth soldiers on the ground raised their weapons, aiming at the streaks of light, laughing at how few they were. They didn't laugh for long. The first pod slammed into the earth with the force of bombs, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The ground split open, and in the center of that chaos, figures emerged, tall, armored in black, their movements sharp and purposeful. They carried weapons that glowed a cold blue, and when they fired, entire lines of Karth troops vanished in flashes of light. The aliens had fought 1,000 wars, but they had never seen soldiers like this. These humans didn't shout. They didn't cheer. They didn't even slow down. They advanced with silent precision, every shot calculated, every movement deadly. The Karth tried to surround them, but the humans broke through like a storm. Plasma bolts bounced off their armor. Blades shattered against their shields. Within minutes, the invaders who had ruled this planet for months were in full retreat. Rel could only watch from a distance, speechless. "Commander," his aide whispered, her voice shaking. "They're winning." He didn't answer. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The Deathworlders were real. And they were unstoppable. In orbit above, massive human warships drifted silently through the clouds of debris. Their hulls were dark and scarred, showing signs of ancient battles. They didn't use standard Union transponders. Instead, their signals pulsed with a strange frequency that made every nearby sensor fail. The largest of these ships bore a name burned into its side in bold letters, TSS Nemesis. Inside that ship, Captain Rhea Kale watched the battle unfold through her visor. Her face was calm, her voice cold. "Surface resistance collapsing," her officer reported. "Orders, Captain." Rhea's eyes narrowed. "Secure the capital. Any Dominion forces that surrender, ignore them. We didn't come for prisoners." The officer hesitated. "And the Union survivors?" She paused for a moment, then replied, "We'll see if they remember what they did to us." On the surface, the Karth Dominion made one last desperate counterattack. Heavy assault tanks rolled through the streets, firing into the smoke. One human soldier stepped forward, holding a launcher the size of his arm. He fired once. The tank exploded, flipping into the air like a toy. The Deathworlders advanced again. From the broken command tower, Rel and his soldiers could hear the thunder of battle growing closer. Then, out of nowhere, a shape appeared through the smoke. It was one of them, a Deathworlder. His armor was cracked and covered in dust, his helmet reflecting the burning light of the city. He raised one hand slowly, signaling for them to stay down. "Union forces?" the man asked through his helmet speaker. Rel hesitated. "Yes," he replied cautiously. The soldier turned his head slightly. "You're lucky we're not here for you." Without another word, the human walked past them and disappeared into the smoke. The sound of explosions followed him. Rel's aide whispered, "Sir, are they here to save us?" He shook his head. "No. They're not saving anyone. They're destroying the enemy, and they don't care who gets in their way." Across the battlefield, the human forces kept pushing forward. Every Karth position they found, they erased. Every weapon they faced, they crushed. Their ships above unleashed orbital strikes so precise that they cut through enemy lines without touching the surviving Union shelters. But no one knew if that was mercy or calculation. The Union survivors watched in silence as the Deathworlders tore through their enemies like shadows. No celebration. No speeches. Just cold efficiency. When the smoke began to clear, the once invincible Karth army was gone. Nothing but scorched ground and drifting ash. For the first time in weeks, the sound of enemy weapons stopped. A faint voice crackled through the broken radio systems. Female, steady, and calm. This world is secured. Human command, Phase 2 complete. Prepare for reclamation. Reclamation. The word carried a strange weight. Rel frowned. What are they reclaiming? He muttered. His aide looked up, eyes wide with realization. Sir, this used to be a human colony, centuries ago. He stared at her in disbelief. That's impossible. All human colonies were destroyed during the purge. She shook her head slowly. Maybe not all. Above them, the human ships began to move again, their engines burning like stars. The Karth Dominion's remaining vessels tried to retreat, but the humans gave no warning. Beams of light cut through space, slicing enemy ships in half before they could even jump to warp. Within minutes, the entire Karth fleet was gone, wiped from existence. Rel could feel the truth sinking in like ice. The galaxy had feared this day for generations. The Deathworlders had returned. And they had come prepared for war. The city burned under a gray sky. Smoke rose from every street, curling upward like ghosts of the fallen. The battle was over, but the silence that followed felt even heavier than the war itself. The Deathworlders now moved through the ruins, slow, methodical, and completely silent. Commander Reldar watched from the shattered balcony as the black-armored humans marched across the streets below. They did not look like soldiers of mercy, they looked like executioners. Their armor bore strange markings, white symbols, numbers, and a single word stamped across every chest plate: terror reclaimed. Rel's aide stood beside him, her voice low. They're not helping the survivors, she said. They're searching the city. Rel nodded grimly. They're looking for something. Down below, a human officer removed her helmet, revealing a pale face streaked with soot. Her eyes were cold steel gray, her expression unreadable. This was Captain Rhea Kale, commander of the Terran Strike Fleet. She spoke into her comlink with calm authority. Squads 2 through 6, sweep the North Sector. Kill anything that still moves. Retrieve Union technology intact. We take no prisoners. The soldiers obeyed without hesitation. Plasma fire echoed in the distance again, but it was brief. The humans were not fighting anymore. They were cleaning up. One Union medic tried to approach them, waving a white flag and shouting for help. Before he could take another step, a Deathworlder drone hovered above and locked onto him. The medic froze. Then, Rhea's voice came through the translator. Stay where you are. You are not cleared for contact. The medic obeyed, trembling. These weren't allies. These were forces of nature. Rel turned away from the balcony and stepped into the damaged control room. His officers worked in silence, repairing what little of their systems still functioned. Any idea what they're doing? Rel asked. They've taken the old vault beneath the capital, one technician replied. It's heavily guarded now. No one gets near it. A vault. Rel frowned. There's nothing valuable left here. That's what we thought, the technician said quietly. But the humans, they seemed to know exactly where to go. Hours passed. The sun dipped behind the smoke, and night came without stars. The only light came from human ships drifting low across the horizon, their engines humming like distant thunder. Every surviving alien hid indoors, afraid to even breathe too loudly. The Deathworlders patrolled the streets, their movements smooth and practiced. Every few minutes, a deep thud echoed, the sound of explosives as they breached more sealed chambers beneath the city. In one of those chambers, Captain Rhea Kale stood surrounded by old machinery covered in dust. Her soldiers had cleared the area, and now the captain's gaze was fixed on a massive metal door embedded in the stone. Ancient writing was carved into it, old Terran script, barely legible. One of her engineers approached. "We've confirmed it, ma'am. This was built during the first expansion era. Over 500 years ago." Rhea nodded slowly. "Then it's true. This was one of ours." The engineer hesitated. "You think the Union knew?" Rhea's expression hardened. "They knew. They buried it, and they left our people here to die." With a wave of her hand, the door was blown open. Inside lay rows of black crates, stacked to the ceiling. The soldiers opened them one by one. Inside were weapons, human weapons, sealed in stasis, untouched for centuries. And among them, a single data core glowing faintly with power. "Download everything," Rhea ordered. "I want to know who ordered the purge." On the surface, Commander Rel could see flashes of light coming from underground. His sensors picked up strange readings. "They've found something," he said quietly. His aide frowned. "What could it be?" "Something worth killing for," he replied. Suddenly, a tremor shook the ground. Alarms screamed through the ruined streets. The humans were moving quickly now, hauling large containers toward their ships. Whatever they had uncovered, it was dangerous. Then, for the first time, Rhea broadcast to every open channel. Her voice echoed across the ruined city, calm but filled with ice. "This planet is no longer under Union control. It has been reclaimed by the Terran Dominion. All unauthorized forces must evacuate immediately. Any who resist will be erased." The word erased sent chills through everyone listening. Rel's aide turned pale. "They're taking over," she whispered. "They're not rescuing us, they're replacing us." Rel didn't reply. He simply watched as one of the massive human warships lifted off, carrying its mysterious cargo into orbit. The air around it shimmered with energy, and for a second, he thought he saw something impossible, a faint, glowing symbol forming above the ship. The old human insignia. A circle with 3 burning lines through it, the mark of the Deathworlders. In the control chamber beneath the city, Rhea Kale stared at the ancient data core now glowing in her hands. The text on the screen began to scroll, showing classified Union orders from centuries past. Her jaw tightened as she read. Order 47A. Containment of Terran species. Reason: uncontrollable aggression. Solution: systemic eradication. Rhea's voice dropped to a whisper. "You tried to erase us, and you failed." She looked up at her soldiers, her expression cold. "No more hiding. No more forgiveness. We take back everything." Above, the night sky trembled as the human fleet began to move again. Their engines flared to life, lighting up the darkness with crimson light. The Deathworlders were not here to save the galaxy, they were here to make it remember what fear truly meant. The truth had been buried for centuries, hidden under lies and silence. Now, in the burning ruins of Varelles, that truth had clawed its way back into the light. The humans, those the galaxy once called Deathworlders, had returned not as victims, but as executioners. Above the shattered world, the Terran fleet floated like a black storm. Their ships were massive and silent, shaped for war rather than beauty. The largest of them, the TSS Nemesis, pulsed with energy as it transmitted a single message across the stars: "We remember." Commander Reldar listened to that message in disbelief. It echoed through every communication system, repeating in every known language. "We remember," he whispered to himself, trying to understand what the humans were saying. His aide, pale and shaken, turned toward him. "Sir, what do they mean?" Rel's voice was hollow. "It means the past isn't dead." Deep in the Terran command deck, Captain Rhea Kale stood before a vast holographic display showing the old Union archives. Her engineers had managed to extract data from the ancient vault they uncovered beneath the city. What they found was worse than any legend. The file showed maps, orders, and secret council meetings from centuries ago, the day the Union had decided humanity was too dangerous to exist. They had labeled Earth a Class Red threat world, quarantined the system, and sent a fleet to destroy it. But the purge had failed. Somehow, the humans had survived. Stranded, abandoned, and enraged, they had adapted to the worst conditions imaginable. Earth had become a death world in truth, its gravity, storms, and creatures forcing its survivors to evolve harder and stronger than any other species. Now those survivors were back to collect their debt. Rhea's voice was calm but sharp as a blade. "We spent centuries in the ashes," she said to her officers. "We learned to fight where no one else could survive. And now, we're going to remind them why they feared us." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Oren Voss, leaned forward. "The Union won't stay silent after this. They'll see this as an invasion." Rhea turned her cold gaze toward him. "Good. Let them come." On Varellis, the Union survivors were trying to repair what little they could of their systems. The sky above them was filled with black ships. The humans weren't attacking anymore, but they weren't leaving either. They were spreading across the planet, building relay towers, scanning old ruins, and activating machines no alien had ever seen before. Rel couldn't take it anymore. He ordered a small shuttle and flew directly toward the Terran flagship. His officers warned him it was suicide, but he didn't care. Someone had to speak to them, to understand what they wanted. When he arrived, the human defense grid locked onto him instantly. Dozens of red targeting beams crossed his cockpit. A cold female voice came over his comm. "Identify yourself." "Commander Reldar of the Galactic Union Defense Fleet," he replied quickly. "I request a meeting with your command." There was a long pause. Then, to his shock, the voice said, "Permission granted. Dock at Bay 9. You have 10 minutes." The shuttle entered the dark hangar, surrounded by rows of armored soldiers. The air felt heavier here, filled with tension. Rel stepped out, his heart pounding. Captain Rhea Kale was waiting for him. She looked human, mostly, but there was something in her eyes that no other species had. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was something colder. "You wanted to talk," she said simply. Rel bowed slightly. "You saved us from the Karth Dominion. For that, we thank you. But your actions, they are causing fear across the sector. What are you doing here?" Rhea studied him for a moment. "Reclaiming what's ours." "This world?" Rel asked. "It belonged to the Union for centuries." "No," Rhea replied sharply. "It belonged to us before the Union existed. Before your kind voted to erase us." Rel felt the weight of her words. "That was before my time," he said quietly. "Before anyone living now was born." "And yet," Rhea said, taking a step closer, "you're still standing on the graves your council built." She handed him a data chip. "This is what your Union did. Read it. Understand it. And then tell me why we should ever trust you again." Rel took the chip, unsure what to say. "What will you do now?" he asked softly. Rhea turned away, her expression unreadable. "We're done asking for forgiveness. The Terran Dominion will reclaim every system that once held our people. If anyone stands in our way, we'll remove them." Her voice grew colder. "We're not here to destroy the galaxy, Commander. We're here to survive it." Back in orbit, the Terran fleet began to expand its presence. One by one, neighboring star systems fell silent as human ships appeared from nowhere. The Karth Dominion's remaining fleets tried to regroup, but they were intercepted and annihilated. The Union Council finally responded, sending a desperate message to Rhea's forces: "Cease hostilities. The Galactic Union requests immediate negotiation." Rhea smiled faintly as she read it. "Now they want to talk," she muttered. "They didn't listen when we begged for help centuries ago." She turned to her officers. "Ignore them. We move to Phase 3. Begin planetary isolation." Across the stars, Terran ships surrounded Varellis in a perfect ring of steel and fire. No one entered. No one left. The humans had drawn a line across the galaxy, and the message was clear. Earth had returned, and this time, it would not be forgotten. The humans fought like shadows, striking without warning and vanishing before anyone could react. Entire fleets disappeared overnight. Planets once filled with life went dark, their signals cut off in seconds. To the Galactic Union, it felt like the end of an era, their once unshakable power crumbling under the return of those they had abandoned. Commander Reldar watched from the command deck of his ship, unable to believe what he was witnessing. The humans had moved beyond simple warfare, they were ghosts in the void. No one saw them arrive. No one saw them leave. Only destruction followed wherever they went. Reports from the outer colonies flooded in, ships lost, worlds silenced, Dominion garrisons erased. Even the most advanced Union scanners could not trace the human fleets. "They're using systems we can't read," his aide said quietly. "It's like their ships aren't even there until they fire." Rel nodded grimly. "They've turned war into science." In the darkness of space, aboard the Terran flagship Nemesis, Captain Rhea Kale stood before her officers, reviewing the progress of their campaign. The room was lit only by the faint blue glow of holograms showing entire star systems blinking out one after another. "Dominion resistance is collapsing," her lieutenant reported. "We've taken 5 more sectors in the last rotation." Rhea's voice was calm, but her eyes burned with determination. "And the Union?" "Still silent, Captain," the lieutenant replied. "They're holding emergency meetings but haven't deployed any fleets." "They will," Rhea said softly. "Once they realize we're not stopping." Her focus shifted to a blinking red mark on the map, a massive Karth command center located deep within the Nebrith system. It was one of the last major strongholds of the Dominion, and from the intercepted transmissions, it was clear they were preparing a final stand. Rhea turned to her officers. "We end it here. Prepare the fleet. No survivors." The Terran fleet emerged from warp like a storm. Dozens of ships, dark and silent, surrounded the Nebrith system. The Karth armada was waiting, thousands of vessels arranged in tight formation. Their commander, a hulking alien named Varric, stood on his bridge staring into the empty void. "They're here," he growled. "Fire on sight." The sky exploded with plasma fire, bright enough to turn the void into a sea of flame. But the Terrans didn't respond, not immediately. They waited, silent and still, letting the enemy waste their energy. Then, without warning, the humans struck back. From behind the Karth fleet, human stealth ships uncloaked, firing precision railguns that pierced through multiple ships in a single shot. EMP waves rippled through the enemy formation, shutting down their engines. Within minutes, half the Dominion armada was dead in space. "They're inside our network," one Karth officer shouted in panic. "They've hacked our targeting systems." But it was too late. The Deathworlders were everywhere, boarding ships, cutting through armor like it was paper, fighting with terrifying speed. Captain Rhea's voice echoed across every Terran channel. "No mercy. No retreat. Finish them." The battle was brutal and fast. In less than an hour, the once mighty Karth fleet was reduced to burning wrecks drifting in silence. When the smoke cleared, only one ship remained, the command vessel of Varric himself. Rhea ordered it boarded. Inside, her soldiers found the alien general surrounded by bodies of his own crew, refusing to surrender. He hissed as Rhea entered. "You, Deathworlder, this is revenge, isn't it?" She looked at him with cold eyes. "No," she replied. "This is history correcting itself." Varric snarled and lunged at her, but she drew her plasma blade and struck him down in one clean motion. As he fell, he whispered, "You'll burn the stars." Rhea didn't answer. She turned away and gave the order, "Scuttle the ship." Explosions tore through the Karth command vessel as the humans withdrew. In orbit, the Terran fleet watched the last Dominion flagship disintegrate into fire. The war that had lasted decades ended in less than a day. On Varellis, Commander Rel received the news in silence. The Dominion is gone, his aide said. Completely wiped out. Rel didn't cheer. He only stared at the empty space on his map where an empire had once been. And now? He asked softly. Now, his aide whispered. They'll come for the Union. Deep inside the Nemesis, Captain Rhea stood at the viewport, watching the burning remains of the Karth fleet drift away like ashes in the void. She spoke quietly, almost to herself. They took our world and thought they could erase us. They created the very monsters they feared. Her lieutenant approached cautiously. Captain, with the Dominion gone, the Union will have to respond. Do we strike first? Rhea's eyes narrowed. No. Let them make the first move. Let them believe they still have control. And when they do, she paused, a faint smile touching her lips, we'll remind them what fear really means. The Deathworlders were not just fighting a war, they were rewriting the balance of power across the galaxy. The Karth were gone, but the real enemy, the one that had betrayed humanity centuries ago, was next. The humans had shed the title of victims forever. They were hunters now, and their hunt had only just begun. The galaxy trembled as word of the Karth Dominion's destruction spread. Entire governments fell silent, their leaders staring in disbelief at the holofeeds showing the annihilated fleets. Billions watched as the once mighty Dominion's banners burned, replaced by the emblem of Earth, a simple blue sphere surrounded by black wings. The Deathworlders had returned, and this time, they weren't stopping. Across the Union, fear began to spread like wildfire. The Council of Worlds met in secret, their chamber filled with tension so thick it felt like the air itself was cracking. Representatives from dozens of species shouted over one another, their voices filled with panic. They've wiped out an entire empire in one day, screamed the Trelvian delegate. If they turn their fleets on us next, we won't stand a chance. Another delegate, a towering reptilian being named Dracos, slammed his claws on the table. You don't understand humans. They don't conquer for glory, they destroy for survival. Once they believe you're a threat, nothing will stop them. The chamber fell silent as the Union High Chancellor, a gray-skinned being named Orlan Vass, finally spoke. We built the Union to protect the galaxy from chaos. And now chaos wears a human face. We have two choices, negotiate or prepare for war. A low murmur filled the room. Negotiate, someone hissed. With Deathworlders? But Orlan ignored them. He knew something others didn't. Decades ago, he had been among those who approved the decision to abandon Earth, to leave humanity behind when the planet was dying. It was supposed to be mercy. But now, it was the one mistake haunting every species in the galaxy. Meanwhile, aboard the Terran flagship Nemesis, Captain Rhea Kale stood before a massive holographic display showing the Union's fleet deployments. She studied it silently, her sharp eyes scanning the data. They're gathering ships near the Ardent Line, said her tactical officer. It's a defensive move. Rhea nodded slowly. They're scared. But fear makes people dangerous. We can't underestimate them. Another officer spoke up. Our spies report the Union is calling for an emergency summit. They want peace talks. The room went quiet for a moment before Rhea replied. Peace talks. She almost laughed. After centuries of silence, betrayal, and exile, now they want peace? She turned to face her officers, her voice firm and cold. We don't negotiate with those who left us to die. The crew nodded in grim agreement. Humanity had not forgotten how it was treated, how its cries for help were ignored, how its people starved while the galaxy watched. The Deathworlders didn't fight for power. They fought for justice. Later, in her private quarters, Rhea stared at a small, faded picture, a photograph of old Earth before it burned. Oceans, forests, cities filled with light. A world that no longer existed. We gave them everything, she whispered to herself. And they gave us nothing. The door opened softly, and her lieutenant, Kai Ren, entered. Captain, we've received a message from the Union High Council. They want to meet at the neutral core station. Rhea looked up. And the message? They're asking for an end to hostilities. They say the galaxy can't survive another war. Rhea was silent for a long time. Finally she said, set course for the core. But make no mistake, Kai, we're not going there to surrender. As the Nemesis moved through the void, thousands of Terran ships followed. Their engines glowed with the cold light of vengeance. To the rest of the galaxy, the Deathworlder fleet looked like a storm devouring the stars. When they arrived at the neutral core station, the Union's diplomats were already waiting. Hundreds of ships from dozens of worlds, all orbiting a massive white citadel that floated above a gas giant. Inside, Chancellor Orlan Vass stood before the council chamber, his hands trembling slightly. When the doors opened and the humans entered, the entire room fell silent. The Deathworlders walked in without a word, their black armor reflecting the light like obsidian. Rhea led them, her presence commanding. Every alien in the room felt it, the raw weight of humanity's anger. Orlan tried to smile. Captain Kale, welcome. Spare me the welcome, Rhea interrupted coldly. You left us to die. You called it mercy. Tell me, Chancellor, was it mercy when our children starved while your fleets watched from orbit? Orlan's voice faltered. That was a mistake of our ancestors. We regret what happened. Rhea took a step forward, her eyes burning. Regret doesn't bring back the billions who burned. Regret doesn't erase what you did. The chamber went quiet again. Then Orlan said carefully, if we fight, the galaxy will fall into ruin. But if we unite, maybe there's still hope. Rhea stared at him for a long moment before turning away. You're right about one thing, Chancellor. There is hope. But it's not for you, it's for us. With that, she and her officers turned and walked out, leaving the council in stunned silence. Outside, the human fleet powered up its engines. The time for words was over. Rhea stood on the bridge, watching the stars. Prepare the fleet, she ordered. If they want peace, they'll find it in silence. And as the Nemesis turned toward the Union's core systems, one truth spread across the galaxy. When Deathworlders came, peace was no longer an option. The council chamber remained in silence long after the humans had left. No one dared to speak. The air still felt heavy, charged with the presence of the Deathworlders who had just walked out. Some delegates trembled, others stared blankly, and a few whispered prayers in languages long forgotten. Chancellor Orlan Vass stood motionless, his mind spinning. He had seen death before, but not like this. Not walking, not breathing, not speaking with the calmness of gods who had returned to judge the living. What do we do now? Asked a small, frail delegate from the Hyron sector. They won't stop. Orlan looked up, his face pale. We do what we should have done centuries ago. We beg them to forgive us. But deep inside, he knew it was already too late. Across the stars, the Deathworlder fleets began to move. The Nemesis led them, black ships slicing through the void, silent and cold. Captain Rhea Kale stood on her bridge, staring into the endless expanse. All fleets report readiness, said her lieutenant, Kai Ren. We have movement from the Union defense line, hundreds of ships forming near the core perimeter. Rhea nodded slightly. They'll try to stop us. Do we attack? Kai asked. Rhea's eyes hardened. Not yet. Let them make the first move. Fear will break them faster than fire. Hours later, the Terran fleet arrived near the core's outer edge, where the Union's greatest defensive armada waited, a wall of ships stretching across light years. Millions of lives, thousands of vessels, all armed and ready. The two forces faced each other across the dark, silent gulf of space. On board the Union flagship Resolute, Admiral Serac watched the tactical display nervously. They're not moving, his officer said. Just staring at us. Serac frowned. What are they waiting for? On the Nemesis, Rhea smirked faintly as she watched the enemy fleet hold position. They think they can intimidate us with numbers, she said quietly. But numbers don't matter in the dark. Orders, Captain? Kai asked. Rhea's voice was soft but firm. We begin Operation Eclipse. Moments later, every light aboard the Terran fleet shut off. Power signatures vanished. The radar systems of the Union ships suddenly went blank. Panic spread instantly. "We've lost readings," shouted an officer aboard the Resolute. "We can't track them. They've disappeared." "That's impossible," Serac snapped. "No fleet can vanish like that." But as he spoke, something vast moved in the blackness. One by one, Union ships began to explode, clean, surgical hits that left no trace of where the attack came from. "They're inside the perimeter," someone screamed. The entire defensive line fell into chaos. The Deathworlders moved like ghosts, their cloaked ships weaving through the enemy formation with terrifying precision. Plasma cannons fired in every direction, hitting nothing but empty space. Then, through the static and fear, Rhea's voice echoed across the Union frequencies, a cold whisper that froze every heart that heard it. "You called us monsters. You were right." The Nemesis uncloaked directly in front of the Resolute, its massive form dwarfing the Union flagship. Serac stared in disbelief. "Fire everything," he roared. The Union ships unleashed a storm of plasma and missiles, but it was useless. The Nemesis shields absorbed the impact like rain on stone. Then Rhea gave a single command. "Return fire." A single shot from the Nemesis forward cannon erupted in blinding light. The Resolute split in half instantly, vaporized before its distress call even finished. Across the line, more explosions bloomed as Terran warships tore through the enemy with terrifying speed. Within minutes, the largest defensive fleet in galactic history was gone. On the Nemesis, the bridge was silent except for the hum of the engines. Kai looked at the screens, disbelief in his voice. "All Union defenses are down. They didn't even touch us." Rhea didn't smile. She only whispered, "This is what they made us." Back in the core, Chancellor Orlan received the news. "The defense line is gone," his aide said shakily. "The Deathworlders are advancing." Orlan's hands trembled as he turned toward the great window of the council chamber, looking out into the stars. "We are witnessing the end," he said softly. "Not of humanity, but of us." In the following days, Union worlds went dark one by one. Their fleets surrendered, their cities silenced. But humanity did not destroy everything. They were precise, selective. They struck military installations, shipyards, and political centers, sparing civilians wherever possible. It wasn't conquest, it was correction. On the Nemesis, Rhea stood alone in the observation deck, watching another Union world burn in the distance. Kai joined her quietly. "The Council has sent another message," he said. "They're asking for unconditional peace." "Peace," Rhea repeated, her tone almost amused. "They still think peace is something they can buy." "What should I tell them?" Kai asked. Rhea looked out at the burning planet, her reflection cold and distant in the glass. "Tell them this," she said. "The Deathworlders don't come to rule. We come to remind." "Remind?" Kai asked softly. Rhea turned her gaze toward the endless stars. "That you can't abandon a world and expect it to forget." As the human fleet moved deeper into the Union's territory, the galaxy realized that this wasn't a war anymore, it was judgment. The Deathworlders had fallen from the sky, and the age of the Union was ending, one silent system at a time.